Hi guys, we have a lot of Irish advisors now using analytics, which is fantastic, and we're providing more and more support over in Ireland. We've just hosted a roadshow. We'll be there again later on this year, and we want to provide more and more content and make it available to you online. So we'll put this up onto the YouTube channel, so you can kind of learn and educate yourself in terms of the best ways and most effective ways of using this system as an Irish advisor. I mean, frankly, shouldn't really matter what country in the world you're in. Analytics is pretty general purpose. We have data all around the world. You've got a very good system in analytics, and we just plug in different data sets and away you go. But admittedly, there are some kind of nuances and kind of slightly different ways in which you can use analytics if you are in some of these different locations. So we want, as I said, we've got a lot of content already on the YouTube channel, which I'll cover off a bit on this just to make you guys aware of where that is. But I'll also post this video on there as well. And as I said, this is purposely built for Irish advisors to use their analytics accounts more effectively and efficiently. So we're going to cover off quite a bit. It's probably going to run for about half an hour or so. I'll obviously point you towards their help desk as well. So anyone that's got any questions or needs any further assistance and help, you should probably have details of your account manager already. But there is a very good help desk that's available to you as well. We'll start off with the basics of the system. Appreciate anyone watching this video in future months and years is going to be a difference in your expertise on the system. So we'll start off with the basics and then just start kind of ramping it up over the course of the half an hour. And as I said, try and cover off as much as possible. But first and foremost, whenever you're using analytics, you don't really use any other screen bar this one. There are a few exceptions to that, which we'll cover off, but 90% of your use of the system will be this one screen. And the idea is you work from left to right. So on the left-hand side, you're telling it what data you want to look at. You know, do you want to look at funds? Do you want to look at equities? Do you want to look at sectors, indices? Do you want to build some portfolios? And once you've told it what you want to look at, you skip across to the right-hand side and then tell it what you want to do with that data. Okay, I want to throw all of that data into a 5-year performance graph. I want to put it into some sort of table or maybe a nice little report. And then once you've decided that, you hit generate and it loads up what you've asked it to do. And I always say there's very little limitation here. Quite frankly, whatever you ask of it in terms of the data and ask it what to do with that data, it will just simply create it. Again, there's slight exceptions to that. If you ask for 2,000 funds to put into a line chart, it's clearly going to not be too happy with that. But for the most part, whatever you ask of it, it will create it for you. So I'll give you an example. If I'm looking for a fund, if you go to that instruments tab in the top left hand corner, our database is vast. So there are loads and loads of different funds on our global database. Admittedly, there will only be a certain amount of funds plugged in and plumbed in to the Irish accounts. Generally, funds are available to an Irish investor. That said, if you have your random client that happens to live in a slightly different jurisdiction and they can invest in German funds, then please reach out. As I say, our database is enormous, but we just don't plug in everything into your account. You'd have 200,000 funds in your account, and it would make using analytics slightly tricky. But 99.999% of the time, you'll only need X, Y, and Z funds, and they will be plumbed in here. But don't be too confused if you see some of the universe is plugged into my account. You think, well, I'm going to say I don't have access to that. It's because I have to do demos to advisors all over the world. Hence why I've got a lot of data plugged into here. But Irish advisors will have these Irish funds plugged in. And you've got basically the difference, the way we separate it is we've got onshore and offshore. Now, offshore doesn't necessarily mean it's offshore to Ireland. It's quite confusing. The onshore funds basically means the fund is onshore, so it's based in Ireland, probably located in Dublin, and it's only for sale to Irish investors. So if someone else across the world wanted to invest in that fund, can't do it because it's only available to Irish residents. Ireland offshore basically means it can be domiciled anywhere, probably quite often going to be actually domiciled in Ireland as well. But it's also available to quite a few people, not just Irish investors. So yes, as an Irish investor, you can invest in those funds, but that fund could be available to others as well. So all of these funds are relevant to the Ireland universe. You've got onshore investments, you've got bonds, you've got pensions, and these should really be wrapped into an investment contract. But again, the fund can be domiciled anywhere, but it should be available to an Irish investor. Now, when you're trying to find a fund, that's obviously quite confusing to know, okay, well, if I'm looking for A, B, and C fund, what universe is it part of? Now, most funds you'll be looking at will have an ISIN, a CEDAW, a City MXID. So rather than having to select an individual universe, clicking management groups to find the managers, so New Island Assurance, and then finding all of their funds. So maybe I'm after the Discovery pension, which is great. I can just add that in. Rather going that route, again, if I've just got the ISIN or CEDAW code, I can just pop in a code up here. I only know one code. I just use this time and time again. I should really learn others. But if you click on P12 and enter, that's the code for that fund. Hey presto, I didn't need to know what universe it was part of. I can now add, and again, hey presto, it's added in there. I'm just going to delete that for the purpose of this demo. And I can keep going. Anything I want to analyze, just keep adding. So again, if I want to add 1,000 funds to the list, just go and add 1,000 funds. If I want to go and add some portfolios and sectors, go and add those in exactly the same manner. What do I want to do with that data? I want to throw that into a 5-year performance graph and click on generate. And it does exactly that. It just throws it into a 5-year performance graph and shows you the performance of that fund over that set period. You can find funds with their name as well. So if I come back up to the top here and whack that back to Ireland Offshore, these are funds I use a lot because whenever I give a demo to Irish advisors, they tend to be pretty popular. So I want to use the world allocation dimensional funds. So again, if I just simply type in a buzzword like world allocation, there can't be that many funds in that universe with that title. Click on add, and there we go. There's all 4 of them. So it's automatically found them. And I can go and grab the 60/40 and click on add and add that in. Now I might want to compare that against what the client already has. That's one of the kind of the core uses of analytics. So, okay, well, this is what I'm proposing. What does that client have already? Well, again, they might have that New Island Discovery Fund, so I could just go and add that in and start comparing on a chart and a table. We'll go through some of those in a minute. Equally, they might have a portfolio of funds. They might have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1,000 funds in their portfolio. They might have some shares with Tesla or Barclays, etc. So under that portfolio tab, if you click on new portfolio, this is quite a critical feature of the system because this then feeds into quite a lot of the other tools and features. If I wanted to go and build a portfolio of, I don't know, let's just use New Island as an example, New Island again. If I go back to Island Pension, there's all the management groups, go on New Island Assurance, and I'm just going to do this randomly. I'm just going to say, look, my client has these funds, and I'm just going to add them one by one, and that's going into my pot on the right hand side. And again, I can mix and match. It doesn't have to be just Irish funds. I could go and find, again, direct equities. So you'll find a lot of you, again, if you don't have this universe, reach out if you want it and we'll plug it in. But you should have somewhere in there US equities. I can go and add, again, Tesla or Microsoft or Meta, etc., and add those in. So there's no restriction in terms of what goes into a portfolio. Assign a weighting to each holding if you know it. You might not know the weighting, but you'll surely know the euro value in each. So it's got that many euros in that one, that many in that one, that many in that one. And it will actually work out the percentage weighting for you. And then I can start adding in some additional charges if necessary. The performance that this kicks out at me will be net of fund charge by default. What it won't be doing is it won't be taking into account the platform fee if there is a platform involved. And there might be an advisor fee as well. So you might be charging 0.5%, let's say. So if there are any additional charges that we're clearly not going to know about, pretty much where is it invested, platform, or who it's invested with, as in the advisor, click on the settings tab at the top, additional charge there. I can say, look, my advisor fee plus platform fee is 0.7. And now I can stitch that into the performance so that when I'm showing the performance of this portfolio, it's going to be completely accurate. Equally, if I just wanted to build a portfolio of the world allocation funds, I can do exactly the same thing. So I can go back to my pension, world allocation. No, that's the wrong universe, isn't it? Getting confused. Let's just whack that to Island Offshore. World allocation, should find them 60/40. I could just pop that into my portfolio, give it 100% weighting. So my portfolio only invests in the dimensional world allocation funds, but I can then add a charge of 0.7 on top of that. So I actually get the performance of the world allocation funds net of those additional charges. The other benefit potentially, I could do a, I'm going to get confused here, but I could do a 60/40 and 40/60 and 50/50 split. I'd assume that would make a world allocation 50/50. So you can start kind of mix and matching stuff together. But whatever you call the portfolio from there on, I can save it, and I can save that as my dimensional world allocation 50/50. Or if it was the other portfolio I was just building with New Island, I could call that Keith Baker and his pension. If I could spell it right, pension. Click on save. And once that's saved, these are pop-up windows. So when I come back to the main screen, up under the portfolio tab, as if by magic, I have Keith Baker and his pension. So now I want to compare Keith Baker versus the one I'm now proposing. And then I can start using a whole host of different features on the right hand side. So again, I could just start off with a 5-year performance graph. I want to show the proposed investment dimensional wide allocation versus Keith Baker, and I want to show the reasons why I'm proposing you move into it. What about if I wanted to add some euro value? So at the moment, this is in percentages, where he might be, potentially investing 100,000 euros. So just a bit of a tip: you've got base, so I can flip that to lump sum and just pop any monetary value in there, and then click on generate. And it does exactly the same thing. It shows me, look, with 100,000 invested on day one, this is what it would look like now. It would be 123,000 with dimensional, and 104,000 with their current portfolio. And with analytics, once you've created something you're happy with, you just click on export. So click on export and PDF, landscape or portrait, and you can then extract that from the system, and it'll always come branded with your logo. Or once you're done with it, close it and start again. Now, there's other charts you might want to play around with. So under chart type on the right hand side, you've also got stuff like regular savings withdrawals. So you can actually factor in a regular amount going in or out. So in terms of drawdowns, a good example, or kind of taking an income from the portfolio, I can still show a 5-year performance graph, but this one allows me to factor in a withdrawal, and I can say, yeah, okay, well, the initial investment is 500,000, half a million euros. The withdrawal type I want to set to percentage, because they're allowed their 4% allowance. And now I can show the performance of this stuff net of that 4% income coming out. That's quite a nice example to show, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client would have started off with half a million euros in both. With my dimensional fund, it's been giving you your 4% income, and it's still up. It's still worth 516. So you still got your underlying capital and 16 grand on top. Obviously, with your one, it's massively eaten and eroded into that capital. And now it's 430,000. I call this reverse cash flow. We'll talk about cash flow in a few moments, but cash flow takes your position today and projects it. This is taking your position today and essentially looking backwards. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And again, PDF. You can, again, there's no restriction in terms of how many funds we look at here. So if I wanted to go back to Ireland Offshore, let's go and find my world allocation funds and add them all in. There we go. There's my 4-dimensional world allocation funds. I did that, by the way, but I didn't have to go and select each one individually. I just had it all funds in this list. That's what it defaults to. And I just clicked on add. Now I can change the colors of them. So I want to make all my dimensional funds blue. So it's a bit of a tip. I want to make his portfolio red. And on the right hand side, if let's just mix this up a bit. Let's just do a regular saving. And let's say he hasn't got any amount going in on day one. He's just simply looking to make a 500 euro investment every month. And now I want to look at all of my world allocation funds versus what he's doing, and then show that kind of euro cost averaging going in. And it will tell you, look, at the very, very overall, you've put in 30,000 euros, and at the very bottom there, that's what it's worth now. And again, PDF. The other nice chart to consider, and I would stress, I know I'm using world allocation, I'm going to be focusing on those quite a bit. I'm not trying to flog you, the world allocation funds, it's just because I know they're pretty popular. Clearly, if you've got your own in-house models that you've built, this is exactly the same concept. Okay, just swap out the world allocation funds with your models. If you use a different series of funds, just use those instead. So just try and use your imagination during this trial to say, oh, this is using the world allocation funds, but clearly I'd use my proposed solutions, and it would essentially create the same sort of content just with different data. But if you are looking at a series of solutions, like your internal models or an external model solution, like we do a lot with work with Portfolio Metrics, for example, now they have kind of risk graded model portfolios. This always works quite well with scatter charts, because on the right hand side, if you click on scatter chart, you can throw all of those solutions into, let's just do a 5-year scatter and click on generate, and it allows you to show the performance versus risk. So rather than just looking at performance, I can say, okay, well, these are my solutions that I use on a regular basis, either in-house or external, and it will show me the performance along the left and volatility along the right. And I can see very quickly that Mr. or Mrs. Client's portfolio takes a risk of X, so in this case about 11%, and doesn't take a very good level of performance. Whereas the solution that I'm recommending, that 60/40, is that one. Okay, it's taking on more volatility, but that's fine. That comes back to the risk profiler. So that's the one we're recommending, that's taken a good level of risk, but it's also taking a good level of performance, a solid level of performance compared to what they're already doing. But I can also show them, roughly speaking, what, which one of my solutions or my proposed solutions they're quite closely correlated with. And again, maybe their red dot might be somewhere up here, and we're saying, okay, based on your risk profile, you should be taking a lot less risk than where you're at the moment, and that's why we're recommending this solution down here. Okay, it's not going to shoot the lights out in terms of performance, but that's because it doesn't take anywhere near the level of risk that you are at the moment. So therefore, it won't fall as much if the markets tank. And again, PDF. So these are examples of kind of one-off charts you can create. I've got a load of data on the left. I can just fling that very quickly into a chart. Just a couple of other things before we move on. You can save these lists. So as you saw here, it's quite a good example because I had to go and find those world allocation funds again, and that took me a few seconds. Well, if I'm doing that 300 times a year, that's quite a few seconds I'm wasting constantly trying to find bits of data. So if I'm going to be using these world allocation funds often, or if I'm going to be using my internal model portfolios often, or whatever, or maybe I'll have a fund panel, it doesn't really matter. Whatever funds you're searching for time and time again, or indices and sectors, this is called an active list. I've built an active list of those 4 funds. I can save it. I could save that active list as my world allocation. Funny enough, I've just been using this, so that's why it's come up as dimensional world allocation. But I could save it as my dimensional world allocation panel, or my best funds panel, or my cautious funds, or my favorite balance funds. Again, it's entirely up to you how you use this system. It just means if I reset everything, so if I just clear active list and okay, just wipe everything away, just pretend that I've logged in today, rather than going and having to type in world allocation and Ireland offshore and add, if I just click on open, it loads up all of the panels, for want of a better word, that I've created. And if I go down to where is it? Dimensional, there we go. If I double click on dimensional WA, hey presto, there they are. They just suddenly appear, and I can then start adding in other stuff if need be, and then start creating the charts. So it's a little known feature. They don't look like buttons, people miss them, but you've got open and save beside each other. They're quite useful. Bulk code importer quickly as well. If you've got 500 ISIN codes and you just wanted to bulk upload a load of funds, click on that button. I won't do that now, but if you click on next, you can just in one hit copy and paste all maybe from Excel once, Control V in there. There's your 500. You can even do up to 1,000 at a time, and next, and it would just find all those funds and plonk them back into your active list on the left. Couple of other things again, just before we move on. Sectors are incredibly popular as well up here. So if you're trying to show someone long-term performance, again, thinking about that notion of reverse cash flow, the best thing about cash flow is it takes your position and projects it forward 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You can kind of do the same with analytics. If I'm trying to explain to someone the type of performance they should expect over the coming years by looking at past performance, if you go to your sectors, if I go into maybe that offshore sector again, now we've got all the standard sectors you'd imagine, but we've also got these nifty ones down here, mixed asset. So the reason I'm showing this is because the data goes back pretty far. So I can take your average balanced fund that's available to an Irish investor, and I can take that all the way back to 94, and I can start doing some kind of reverse cash flow on it and say, okay, well, let's use some of these concepts. If I want to go back 20, 30, 40 years, however how long I want to go back. In fact, if I do start of data, we'll just take it back to 1994. So we're talking kind of 30 years. So if I can now say, okay, on a withdrawal basis, if you just invested in your bog standard average balance fund in Ireland over the last 30 years, and you put 500,000 in, and you're withdrawing 4% a year, what does that look like? Would you have any money left? Would you still have the same amount as what you had before, et cetera, et cetera? And it's just quite a nice example of saying, well, look, I can't take my world allocation fund and go back 30 years, or my in-house model portfolio, because we've only been running them for a certain amount of years, but I can take average, which is what cash flow usually does, but reverse it. And so this is live data. This is what your average balance fund in Ireland would have done over the last 30 years. And we could have easily withdrawn 4% a year, kind of skimmed that off the growth, and your growth still would have gone from 500,000 up to 664. And again, on a regular savings basis, what would this look like if I'm a younger investor looking to invest £500 a month over 30 years? And again, that kind of euro cost averaging over a long period of time. I won't go into this in too much detail today, but you've also got really useful market indices as well. So there are various ones to to consider. You've got, I think Irish inflation is in there. You can do a search again, buzzwords, and it'll find it. You've got ECB as well, ECB in consumer price inflation rates. You've also got the ISIC, is it still called the Irish Stock Exchange? There we go. So you've got the ISIC stock exchange index. You can use that on the charts. There is a popular range of indices we created some years ago called Financial Express, which are just growth rates. So again, it kind of goes back to that kind of reverse cash flow idea. What about if I just wanted to show someone what 4% a year looks like over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? If I invest you into an investment solution, Mr. and Mrs. Client, that grows at 4% a year, what does that look like? So it's just allowing you to do that. I can say, okay, well, if something grows at 4% a year, which is that, I now throw that into a line chart, maybe 10 years, 10-year line chart, start at 100,000 growing compound at 4% every year. What does it look like? Well, it looks like that. It looks like 148,056 euros. And again, Peter, but again, I can start adding in the sector average on top of that as well. The other use of that historically has been cash rates. If my client's getting 2% in cash or 0.5% in cash, you can mimic that. And just one last tip whilst I'm recording this is I could actually wrap that into a portfolio and call it something else. So rather than showing them this chart, client that is, something that's just growing at 4%, that looks a bit ugly because it's going to say, well, FE interest 4% in euros. Okay, if I'm a retail investor looking at that, I haven't got a clue what FE. I don't know what the acronym FE stands for. Interest 4%. Again, it's just going to take a bit of time for you to explain it. So a bit of a tip. If I go and create a portfolio, new portfolio, what I could do is include, it's just basically a bit of again, another tip. If you use these little green arrows, the import, so I can import that active list in here. So that 4% I was just looking at on the main screen, it's just imported it in here for me. And now I can give it 100% weighting, and you think to yourself, okay, why is he doing this? Because then I can call it something else. I could call the portfolio Keith Baker cash, or Keith Baker, Standard Life cash account, or whatever. So and then on the chart, it's going to appear, it's still going to be growing at 4% a year. It's going to be that line growing at 4% a year, but the instrument's going to be called Keith Baker savings account or cash account 4%, whatever you want it to be called. It's always worth knowing these little kind of intricacies of the system, so you can then start applying that when you're using it yourself. And I keep saying one last thing before I move on to some of the other features, but again, because this is being recorded, it's a good opportunity for us to show as much as possible. Currencies, something else that I show quite often on demos to Irish advisors that seems to go down quite well. You can actually show the fluctuation of currencies against one another. So I could take the US dollar, so these are all the different currencies we have. I could take the US dollar, add that in. What do I want to do with that US dollar? Well, all I want to do is just throw that into a 10-year performance graph, go back to percentages, but I want to rebase US dollar into euros. That's exactly what it would do. So it would look at the currency changes and shifts over the last 10 years and show the strength of one against the other over that particular period of time. And then again, PDF. So that's, as I said a few moments ago, you've got the opportunity here of jumping into the system and grabbing some data and throwing those into some nice charts. And there are other charts, and most of these charts, again, have a video on the YouTube channel. Bar charts are quite popular as well. But the alternative here is to start using the system to maybe create some reports for yourself. So coming back to my client, Keith Baker, it's a good example. Straight away, that portfolio has a little fact sheet icon next to it. If you click on the fact sheet icon, it gives you something called a medium scan. It basically shows you everything you'd want to know about his portfolio, the holdings he invests in, the performance. We've got ESG ratings with Climetrics and ISS. We've got Crown Ratings, which is our kind of performance rating. It looks at volatility and alpha and consistency against sector. Got some asset allocation charts, and then underneath that, some nice performance graphs showing the performance versus the benchmark of the portfolio. And again, any of this can be changed. So if I don't like it, I can shift it to something else, change it to a different chart, or actually take it out completely. I don't want anything there, and I don't want anything there. And once I'm happy with that, again, branded with your logo, type in maybe a bit of an intro, and then PDF it and send that across to the client. Slightly nicer report. Actually, just before I get onto that one, just to bear in mind, if you hit that little settings tab beside it, you've got short and long version. So we just looked at the medium scan, 2 pages. That's a 1 page. That's a 5 page. So they're worthwhile having a look at. They're called scans, a bit like X-rays. The alternative method you can use is under this reports tab. There's a little feature over here called Custom Portfolio Report Builder, and this allows you to build your own report. So under template, these are all the templates I've built myself. But for someone starting afresh at analytics, you can click on Report Builder. It loads up a little portfolio report builder screen. And on the left, you work from left to right. So on the left-hand side, go and select the pages that you like the look of. So if I'm going to build a report today, I want the first page to look like that, going to show the performance of my portfolio. Then I maybe want to show the underlying holdings. Then perhaps I want to look at the underlying holdings in a bar chart, and then maybe some ESG ratings, and then maybe some asset allocation. Again, it's entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong. And I'm adding the ones that I like and leaving the ones I'm not particularly bothered about. And then again, add all the fact sheets and kids documents if necessary, add those across. And if you click on the little save icon at the top, I can save that as, I've got one called my gold template. And it just means that back on this main screen, if I come back to it, I can take my portfolio, Keith Baker, and again, he could just be invested in the World Allocation One fund. And on the right-hand side, I can throw him into a gold templated report. Now, I could just click generate and it will build it. A couple of little bells and whistles I like to point out. I could title it something. So this could be Keith Baker review. Suddenly got quite dark in here, so I can barely see the keyboard. Keith Baker review 2023. Advisor name is me. Pop that in there. And you can add commentary to this, which is quite nice. So I can tick on that box and say, look, the title's Keith Baker review. Dear Keith. I can then start typing in whatever I like. So this could be anything. You could be talking about the risk profile. You could be talking about valuations. You could be talking about what you like about his portfolio, what you don't like, market commentary, whatever. It will just add more and more pages and more text you write. You probably want to sign it off with your details at the end and then just update. What does that do? Well, if you click on generate, I won't bother waiting for this one because I loaded one up in the background. It looks a bit like this. So there's my logo on every page. There's the cover page I wanted to start with. And as I start working my way down this report, there's my bespoke text that I wanted the client to read initially. And then it goes into the review. There's the performance versus benchmark. There's the holdings. There's the bar charts. There's the ratings, the scatter chart, the asset allocation, and all of the fact sheets tied in at the very end, right the way down to the bottom, looking at a little glossary detailing some of the terminology. So you can mess around with the format. You can mess around with sizes. So I have like gold, silver, bronze. So maybe for certain clients, maybe the ones that have invested the least might get a bronze report, very simple report, basic level of service. And those that invest quite a lot with me and that I consider them kind of VIP clients, they might get the gold report. So you can just have one template. You can have hundreds. It's entirely up to you. So that's some of the reporting. A couple of other reports that are worthwhile quickly covering off on this session. You've also got portfolio comparison. So portfolio comparison is probably the simplest feature to use, where you're just simply saying, look, this is my client existing portfolio, and this is my proposed portfolio. And therefore, I could go and create some nice little one-off charts, which I might have done, and I'll attach it to this report here. Or I want the system itself to create a report for me that does all the comparisons. And within seconds, I've now got a perfect little illustration that says, well, look, Keith, this is where you are now. This is what we're recommending moving forward. And basically, this is why. These are the difference in the holdings, charges, the performance, net of charge. There's the difference in the volatility. So it's actually quite similar. And there's the difference in the asset splits. So again, your risk profile is telling us X. That's why we're recommending this one, not this one. And again, similar to the last report, if I don't like anything in there, I can hit the settings tab, take away the stuff I don't like, and then just save it. And then, or apply it, actually save it will create that as a new default. If you click on apply, it will just apply it to that version, and then come away from here. Once done, PDF it.